Imagine ditching everything,
Yeah.
just dropping it all and setting off on like a grand adventure through Europe.
Oh, yeah.
But not just any Europe, right?
Yeah.
Europe in the middle of the Napoleonic Wars.
Wow.
That's what Lord Byron did,
Yeah.
the, celebrity poet of the Romantic era on his grand tour. And let me tell you, it was even crazier than you think.
It's remarkable, isn't it? I mean, just the idea that while everyone else is kind of hunkering down,
Right.
Byron just decides to set sail and explore the Mediterranean. I mean, he was only 21 at the time.
Wow.
Already published, a poet, but still looking for something more. You get a glimpse of this, kind of restlessness in his early writing.
Yeah.
But the Grand Tour really just throws it into stark relief.
And we're lucky to have a great episode of The Rest is History to guide us on this deep dive today.
Yeah.
Tom Holland and Dominic Sandbrook
They're great.
really do a fantastic job piecing together his journey and shedding light on his complex character.
Yeah, he is complex.
Speaking of complex, let's talk about this decision to travel during wartime.
Right. Yeah.
What kind of person just takes off on a leisurely trip while Europe is locked in this huge battle?
Yeah, that's the quintessential Byron paradox, right?
Oh,
I mean, he
yeah.
was drawn to danger, just kind of the edge of experience. But it wasn't just like, youthful recklessness.
Right.
I mean, Byron had some strong opinions about war.
Yeah.
Partly shaped by, seeing it firsthand, the brutality of it.
Right.
He even expressed like a grudging admiration for Napoleon. He recognized his genius, but he obviously rejected, his tyranny.
Right.
It's a tension that runs through a lot of his work.
Yeah.
This kind of pull between, the allure of power and the yearning for freedom.
So it wasn't just about escaping England, like
Right.
so many young romantics did,
Yeah.
but actually confronting these
Actually,
complex issues.
Head on.
Yeah.
And that's where Childe Harold's Pilgrimage comes in, right?
Okay.
This poem he starts writing during his travels
Yeah.
becomes his way to kind of work through these things. He creates this alter ego, Childe Harold.
Right.
This brooding, melancholic figure
Yeah.
who's wandering through these, amazing landscapes, reflecting on the world and just, the human condition.
Right.
It's both, deeply personal and incredibly insightful about the era.
It's interesting you mentioned the amazing landscapes because his first stop wasn't exactly known for picturesque scenery.
No.
Why Portugal?
Well, you got to remember, a lot of Europe was off limits because of the war.
Right.
So Portugal was one of the, few safe havens.
Okay.
But even there, Byron finds himself caught up in this drama, the aftermath of battles, the refugees, the fear hanging over everything.
Yeah.
This wasn't some, romanticized travelogue. This was like a collision with the harsh realities of war.
And you can feel that shift in his writing, can't you?
Totally.
Going from the somewhat self-absorbed angst of his early work
Yeah.
to a deeper engagement with what's around him.
Yeah.
And I'm also struck by the fact that he chose to travel with his friend, John Cam Hobhouse.
Right.
So this wasn't some solitary soul-searching kind of trip.
No.
It almost feels like he needed someone there with him to see it, to share it.
Right. I mean, that's an interesting observation because, Byron, for all his talk of solitude and melancholy, was a very social person. He craved connection, even though he often struggled to maintain it.
Yeah.
And Hobhouse really served as this foil to him.
Right.
This grounding presence amidst all of Byron's, flights of fancy.
Right.
And their journals and letters from the trip.
Yeah.
Give us this really fascinating insight into their dynamic. The interplay of these two very different personalities. Right. Navigating this, amazing journey.
So they travel through Portugal, taking in the sights, wrestling with the realities of war. Byron is pouring all of this into Childe Harold.
Right.
What happens next? Where do they go?
Well, after Portugal, they venture into Spain, another country, deeply affected by the war.
Yeah.
And Byron's, already kind of complicated views on conflict get even more challenged as he sees the Spanish resistance against Napoleon.
Right.
I mean, he sees their courage, he sees their tenacity, and he starts to identify with this struggle for freedom.
Right.
This theme that becomes more and more important in his work and life.
Yeah.
And it's in Spain that he has this, really intriguing encounter with this group of bandits.
It sounds like something straight out of romantic novel.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it really speaks to Byron's attraction to those who operate outside the bounds of, conventional society.
Right.
He romanticized these figures. He saw them as like symbols of rebellion against authority.
Against the man.
Who knows? Maybe there was a thrill in the danger.
Right.
A way of testing his own limits. It's this blend of, idealism and thrill-seeking that makes him so interesting.
Always pushing those boundaries. So after Spain, their itinerary takes a bit of a turn.
Yeah, it does.
They end up in Albania.
Albania.
Exactly. Like, a typical stop
No.
even back then.
And that's exactly what drew Byron to it.
Oh.
He was looking for something beyond, the well-worn past, something more real, more raw.
Right.
And Albania at the time was this, this wild land ruled by the formidable Ali Pasha, a man known for his charisma and his ruthlessness.
Yeah. Holland Sandbrook mentioned something about impaling his enemies.
Oh, yeah.
Not someone you want to mess with.
Yeah. Not a guy you want to cross.
But Byron seemed almost fascinated by him.
He did.
Why?
Yeah.
What was so captivating?
Ali Pasha represented this kind of power and freedom that Byron was just drawn to. He was a man who operated outside the norms of European society.
Right.
This ruler who was both terrifying and strangely alluring.
Right.
I mean, there's even a physical description of Ali Pasha as this, almost jolly figure, which makes the contrast with his deeds even more striking.
Yeah.
Byron was drawn to this paradox, to this darkness lurking beneath the surface.
It's like that dark side of romanticism, isn't it?
Yeah.
That allure of, the dangerous and forbidden.
Exactly.
And there are hints that the relationship might have been more than just political.
Yeah.
The podcast has even suggested, a possible romantic connection between Byron and Ali Pasha.
It's definitely there, under the surface. I mean, the lavish gifts, the compliments on Byron's appearance, even Ali Pasha's insistence that Byron view him as like a father figure.
Wow.
It's all, very suggestive. But we have to be careful, about applying modern labels to historical figures.
Right.
Remember, Byron's living in a very different time.
Right.
Different social norms.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
But even without putting a label on it.
Yeah.
It's clear that Byron was exploring something
Definitely
beyond the conventional boundaries of his time.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting that he was so drawn to these figures who embodied power and transgression.
Yes.
Like Ali Pasha and even Napoleon.
Absolutely. And this exploration, this pushing against the limits, it becomes even more pronounced as he continues his journey.
Yeah.
From Albania, Byron and Hobhouse travel to Greece.
Right.
They arrive in Athens on Christmas Day, 1809.
Oh, wow.
But even, the cradle of Western civilization couldn't quite live up to his romanticized expectations.
I can picture it now. Byron expecting this pristine vision of ancient Greece, only to find a city occupied by the Ottomans.
Yeah.
And just falling apart.
It was, but it also deepened his connection to the country. He was outraged by the state of the Acropolis, by the neglect he saw.
Right.
And it just fueled his growing sympathy for the Greeks and their desire for independence.
Okay.
And it's in Athens that we see one of the most controversial episodes of his journey.
Okay.
His encounter with, the legacy of Lord Elgin and the removal of the Parthenon sculptures.
Ah, the Elgin marbles.
Yeah.
A story of art, colonialism.
Exactly.
And a whole lot of debate.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear, what was Byron's take?
He was vehemently opposed to it. He saw it as, cultural plunder.
Right.
A desecration of Greek heritage.
Right.
He even wrote a scathing critique of Elgin in Childe Harold.
Yeah.
Calling him a barbarian.
Wow.
Comparing him to all these invaders who had come before.
Right.
It reveals this, emerging sense of social justice in Byron. This indignation at the exploitation of a people and their culture.
Wow. He really didn't hold back.
No.
But wasn't Elgin trying to preserve the sculptures?
Well, that's the debate, isn't it?
Right.
Elgin argued that he was saving the sculptures from further damage.
Right.
And neglect.
Okay.
He claimed, the Ottomans were using the marble for building material, even burning it down for lime.
And Byron wasn't buying it?
Not at all. He saw it as, just a blatant act of British imperialism.
Right.
Stripping Greece of its cultural treasures.
Yeah.
Just to benefit the British Museum. And remember, this is all happening when Britain is at the height of its imperial power.
Right.
So Byron's stance is incredibly bold.
Wow.
Even subversive. It shows his willingness to challenge the status quo, even when it meant going against his own country.
It's fascinating how this whole episode with the Elgin marbles crystallizes so many of his ideas.
Yeah.
His anti-imperialism.
Right, yeah.
His identification with Greece. His growing disillusionment with England.
Exactly, and these themes just become more pronounced as his grand tour continues eastward, deeper into the Ottoman Empire. From Athens, Byron and Hobhouse set sail for Constantinople.
Okay.
The bustling capital of the Ottoman world.
That's where things get really interesting.
It was like stepping into the pages of, the Arabian Nights for him. Yeah. This city of vibrant colors, exotic scents. Yeah. Just a melting pot of cultures, unlike anything he'd ever seen before.
Yeah, I bet it was a sensory overload.
Totally.
After the relative quiet of Greece.
Right.
What struck him the most?
I mean, for one, just the sheer scale of the city. Yeah. Constantinople was one of the biggest cities in the world at that time.
Wow.
But beyond that, it was this clash of, East and West, this blend of ancient traditions and modern influences. Yeah. He was just fascinated by the mosques, the bazaars, the call to prayer echoing through the city. Right. It was all so different. Yeah.
From the world he knew. And yet he seemed to find this strange sense of belonging there.
It sounds like it really fed right into his romantic sensibilities.
Totally.
Did he write much about his experiences in Constantinople?
He did, yeah. In fact, some of his most, vivid and evocative writing comes from this period. He describes the city in Childe Harold with this mix of, awe and apprehension. Yeah. Capturing both its beauty and kind of its unsettling undercurrents.
Right. I can only imagine the impact a place like Constantinople would have on someone like Byron.
Right.
Already so restless, eager for new experiences.
Right.
Did he explore beyond the city?
He did.
Okay.
And this is where we get to one of his most famous exploits.
Okay.
His swim across the Hellespont.
Wait, he swam across it?
The strait that separates Europe and Asia.
Like the whole thing?
The whole thing, yeah.
Wow. It was about a mile across, and he did it in, just over an hour.
Yeah.
It was a feat of athleticism.
Yeah.
But for Byron, it was way more than that.
Yeah.
I mean, he was emulating, the legendary Greek myth of Leander, who swam the strait every night to meet his lover, Hero. Yeah. It was this declaration, of his romantic spirit, his connection to those myths and legends.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
He was always pushing himself physically and mentally.
Yeah.
It's like he needed to, test those limits.
Yeah, yeah.
And speaking of connections... It seems he made quite an impression in Constantinople.
He did.
Even catching the eye of the Sultan himself.
Yes.
Mahmud II.
Mahmud II, yeah.
Did they actually meet?
They did.
Yeah.
Accounts describe Mahmud II being struck by Byron's appearance, particularly his, youthful and striking appearance.
Yes.
And the splendor of his dress. And, the Sultan was known for his efforts to kind of modernize the Ottoman Empire.
Right.
So maybe he saw in Byron a kindred spirit, someone pushing boundaries in his own way.
It's a fascinating contrast, isn't it? Byron, this flamboyant, romantic poet.
Right.
And Mahmud II, the reforming Sultan.
Yeah.
What do you think they talked about?
We can only speculate, but it's clear that Byron's time in Constantinople had a profound impact on him. He was exposed to a world, so different from his own.
Right.
This world of rich history, complex politics, and just cultural richness that challenged his preconceptions. It's a turning point in his journey. Yeah. A moment where he starts to see the world with new eyes.
It sounds like he was really embracing the grand tour, moving beyond the tourist experience.
Right.
Really immersing himself in the culture.
Absolutely.
But even the grandest of tours has to end, right?
It does.
What made Byron finally head back to England?
Well, practicality caught up with him.
Okay.
I mean, he was running low on funds.
Right.
His friends back in England were on the hook for his debts.
Wow.
And they risked being arrested. It seems even a celebrity poet couldn't escape those financial realities.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also speculation that, his anxieties about his sexuality and the potential consequences back home, might have played a part in his decision to go back.
It's a reminder that even someone like Byron, as free-spirited as he seemed, was still bound by the constraints of his time.
Absolutely.
So after almost 2 years of adventure, Byron reluctantly set sail back to England. Did he return a changed man?
Absolutely. Yeah. He was 23 years old.
Wow.
More worldly, more experienced, and carrying with him just this, wealth of material that would soon make him a literary superstar. He'd seen the beauty and the brutality of the world, grappled with his inner demons, and found inspiration, in the ancient past and the exotic present.
This is where the story really takes a turn.
It does.
We've got Byron back in England, about to become this huge literary sensation.
Right.
But before we get into that, you mentioned earlier Byron's anxieties about his sexuality.
Right.
And how that might have played a part in him returning.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, it's a sensitive topic. We have to be careful when trying to understand historical figures through a modern lens.
Right.
But it's clear from his writings and accounts of his life that Byron was attracted to both men and women. And this was obviously, taboo in early 19th century England.
Right.
And could have had, serious legal and social consequences.
So his travels, especially his time in the Ottoman Empire, where attitudes towards sexuality were, more fluid, might have allowed him to, explore those feelings more freely.
Exactly.
But returning to England meant, facing those societal constraints again.
Exactly. And I think this tension, this conflict between, personal desire and societal expectation is something that you see throughout his work. He was constantly pushing those boundaries, both in his life and in his writing.
Right.
Challenging those norms of his time.
It's a reminder that even, our greatest heroes were complex people wrestling with, similar dilemmas that we face today.
Oh, absolutely.
And it makes his story all the more human, all the more compelling.
Yeah.
But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We've got Byron back in England about to become a literary superstar.
Right.
What happens next?
Well, buckle up because things are about to get really interesting.
Okay.
The publication of Childe Harold's Pilgrimage in 1812 unleashes this wave of Byromania that sweeps across England.
Wow.
And beyond. And Byron with, his brooding good looks, his scandalous reputation, and his undeniable talent finds himself right at the center of it all.
This is where his story really takes off.
Yes.
From grand tourist to literary icon.
Yeah.
Byron's journey is far from over.
It isn't.
We'll dive into the frenzy of his fame and the complexities of his later life when we come back.
Welcome back. So we left off with Byron's return and this impending explosion of Byromania.
Yes.
I'm eager to hear how, his grand tour shaped this next chapter.
Well, Childe Harold's Pilgrimage just hit the literary scene like a thunderbolt.
Wow. I mean, the poem's themes of disillusionment, longing, the search for meaning, they resonated deeply with, readers who were dealing with the Napoleonic era.
Right.
Questioning, the old social order.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how he really just tapped into that zeitgeist?
He did.
Perfectly.
Yeah.
Was it just the subject matter?
Yeah.
Or was there something about his style, his voice, that set him apart?
His voice was unique. I mean, he combined this classical sensibility with, romantic intensity.
Right.
Blending these vivid descriptions of exotic places with these introspective reflections on the human condition.
Right.
But there was also this, raw honesty and this vulnerability that people hadn't really seen in poetry before. He laid bare his own struggles, his doubts, his desires. And by doing that, he gave other people permission to do the same.
It's like he created this space for people to, explore their own, inner landscapes alongside him.
Yeah.
And, the fact that he was this handsome, charismatic figure with a hint of scandal surrounding him
of course
probably didn't hurt his popularity.
No. His persona played a huge part in his fame. I mean, he became the embodiment of, the romantic hero, the brooding rebel, the sensitive soul trapped in this world of social constraints.
Right.
People projected their own, desires and anxieties onto him.
Right.
He was a blank canvas for their fantasies.
It's the birth of the modern celebrity, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, the cult of personality,
right.
the fascination with the private lives of public figures. Byron was one of the first to really experience this level of, you know, fame and scrutiny.
Wow.
And it wasn't always easy for him.
Right.
I mean, he craved the attention, but he also resented the intrusion into his life.
Right.
I mean, he was just this mass of contradictions.
Yeah.
Always pushing boundaries, courting controversy, and then retreating into himself.
Okay, so Childe Harold makes him a sensation.
Yeah.
But it's just the beginning, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, what comes next in this, you know, whirlwind of Byromania?
Well, over the next few years, he publishes this string of wildly successful poems.
Okay.
You know, the Giaour, the Bride of Abydos, the Corsair.
Right.
Each one fueling the frenzy even more.
Wow.
I mean, he's writing at this furious pace, drawing inspiration from his travels, his love affairs, his political beliefs.
Right.
His work is passionate, provocative, and often scandalous.
He becomes the voice of a generation, doesn't he?
He does,
Yeah.
challenging conventions, questioning authority, expressing the hopes and, you know, anxieties of a world on the brink of change. But his outspokenness, his refusal to, you know, conform,
Right.
also makes him some powerful enemies.
Right.
I mean, his personal life becomes, you know, fodder for gossip.
Yeah.
His political views are seen as dangerous.
Right.
And the rumors about his sexuality just get louder.
So this fame
Yeah.
that he seemed to both crave and resent
Yeah.
becomes this double-edged sword.
Exactly. The pressure, the scrutiny,
Right.
the constant attacks on his character.
Yeah.
It takes its toll. And eventually, it just becomes too much.
What?
In 1816, facing mounting debts, a crumbling marriage,
Yeah.
and the threat of, you know, social ostracism,
Right.
he leaves England for good.
It's a heartbreaking turn, isn't it?
It is.
This man who had, you know, captured the hearts and minds of a nation.
Yeah.
Forced to flee his homeland.
Right.
Where does he go?
He spends, you know, the rest of his life in self-imposed exile, mostly in Italy.
Okay.
But his exile doesn't diminish, you know, his creative output.
Right.
In fact, he produces some of his most, like, mature and ambitious work during this time.
Oh, wow.
You know, including his epic satire Don Juan.
Right.
And his powerful plays Manfred and Cain.
It seems like that distance from England,
Yeah.
from all those societal constraints,
Right.
gave him a new perspective.
It did.
A new freedom.
Yeah.
To explore these, like, more challenging themes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's during this period that he becomes deeply involved with the movement for Greek independence. You know, this thread we saw emerge during his grand tour, his fascination with Greece, his outrage over the Elgin marbles, it all comes full circle.
It's a powerful testament to, like, the impact of those early travels, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
That a journey in his youth could shape the course of his life so profoundly.
Byron uses his fame, his fortune,
Right.
to support the Greek cause,
Yes.
raising funds, recruiting volunteers, and eventually even traveling to Greece to join the fight himself.
He does.
Wait, he actually went to Greece to fight?
He did.
Wow.
Yeah.
This guy wasn't just talking the talk.
No.
He was walking the walk.
He believed passionately in the Greek struggle for freedom, seeing it as this continuation of, you know, those ancient ideals of democracy and self-determination. And he was willing to, you know, put his life on the line for it.
It's an incredible act of courage and conviction.
It is.
Yeah.
But tragically, his time in Greece is cut short. In 1824, he contracts a fever while in Missolonghi.
Yeah.
And he dies at the age of 36.
What a heartbreaking end to such, you know, a vibrant, tumultuous life.
Yeah.
It's almost like, you know, a Greek tragedy itself, isn't it?
It does have that sense of inevitability. You know, a life meant for greatness.
Right.
But cut short by fate.
But even in death.
Right.
Byron becomes this legend.
He does.
Yeah.
He dies a hero fighting for his cause, cementing his place, not just in English literature, but in Greek history as well.
It's amazing to think how much he did in such a short time.
Yeah.
It's like he lived more in those 36 years than most people do in a lifetime.
Totally.
What about his legacy?
Yeah.
How is he remembered today?
Byron's legacy is, complex and multifaceted. I mean, he's still considered one of the greatest romantic poets.
Yeah.
His work influencing countless, writers, artists, musicians.
Yeah.
He helped shape that image of the romantic hero.
Right.
That brooding, rebellious figure tormented by, inner passions.
Right.
And his, advocacy for Greece helped galvanize European support for their cause.
So he left his mark on literature, politics, even popular culture.
Right.
It's hard to imagine, the Romantic era without him.
He captured the spirit of his age, with all its contradictions and complexities. And his grand tour, that journey we've been exploring today was like this microcosm of his life, this search for adventure, beauty, freedom, and ultimately a sense of purpose.
It's a journey that makes you think, isn't it?
It does.
About the power of travel. To change us, to challenge our perspectives.
Yeah.
Lead us to unexpected places.
Totally.
It makes you wonder what kind of journey we'd take if we had the chance to create our own grand tour.
Yeah. What places would we go? What experiences would we seek out?
Yeah.
And how would those experiences change us?
Right.
It's worth thinking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the life of Lord Byron.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed this exploration of a life lived on a grand scale, a life full of passion, adventure, and ultimately, meaning, if you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to subscribe and join us next time as we delve into another fascinating corner of history, culture, and ideas.